The first video I made covering this story went crazy. Many of you are saying Cesar should be in prison. Some of you want DJ Envy in prison too. After releasing the video, it fully hit me how large this Ponzi scheme is. After a few more victims sent me DMs on Instagram stating they lost a combined $700,000 to Cesar, I realized this is far bigger than I imagined. I even interviewed a real estate attorney based in New Jersey to help assist in understanding what's next in this case. Are Cesar Pina and DJ Envy going to end up in prison? So far, only civil lawsuits have been filed against Cesar Pina and DJ Envy. Why haven't we seen any criminal charges yet?
Well, obviously the government still needs to investigate the case. Before they come forward with charges, they're going to investigate the case in graphic detail. They're going to get as much evidence as they can. They're going to compile it together, and then they're going to move forward guns blazing. They're going to speak to every victim. They're going to speak to attorneys. They're going to gather information. They're going to get all evidence that they have that they can use against them. They're going to have it ready before they move forward with their case.
Unfortunately, it takes time for the federal authorities to gather substantial evidence necessary to win in court, but Cesar's time is coming. Seeing my dreams unfold, nightmares come true, it was time to marry my prison cell, and I said, yeah, I do. Here's DJ Envy daydreaming about being innocent in this Ponzi scheme.
So really, I think the question's going to rely on, did he know that this was a scheme, and did he use his public influence to perpetuate that scheme? That's going to be the question.
In civil lawsuits, everything gets exposed to the public.
Through those lawsuits, there's going to be something called discovery. And discovery is when depositions are conducted, notice to produce documents are sent out, requests for admissions, interrogatories. That's when both sides are trying to compile as much information as possible on exactly what happened. And through the discovery process, people learn things.
I have a theory. I think the reason why Envy hasn't publicly blasted Cesar yet is because he needs Cesar to stay quiet about his involvement. One of the victims just sent me this image. Cesar put all of his Ohio houses in his daughter's name a couple weeks ago on August 9th. Cesar deleted his Instagram last night, and I've been told he's on the run.
I think right now, a case against Cesar is much more obvious than a case against DJ Envy. Looking at it kind of from a legal point of view, vantage point, I think it's going to be a hard case for them to prove that DJ Envy knew about this and was perpetuating it.
DJ Envy claims to have lost a significant amount of money in the Taylor Court Apartments deal and had no knowledge of the scheme. But he also had an office next door to Cesar for years. In the first video, I described how numerous investors came to Cesar's office demanding their payment back. DJ Envy is trying to convince us that he had no idea numerous investors were storming into the office next to his demanding money. And you were still promoting Cesar when your multi-million-dollar project that was supposed to be underway for 3 years looked like this?
If he had no idea, and there is obviously question to that because he was an investor himself and he is owed money by Cesar. I think it's about $500,000, something like that. So I think that kind of furthers his point that he had no clue that this was going on, that he in fact made money from initial investments. And based off that happening, based off making that money, he kind of pushed this idea that you can invest in real estate, flip homes, make money. And people relied on those representations. But in order for him to have accountability here is if he knew about it and continued to push it, if continued to promote him.
Cesar paid Envy early in the scheme so that he would then promote that the investment was legit. It never was, and the signs were pretty obvious. The two victims that just reached out to me both believe that Envy was taking a percentage of the profits. My current position right now is that at some point Envy knew everything wasn't good and still promoted and received a profit, which means he likely has real liability here. Cesar promoted 30% returns in 6 months, which is already a huge red flag. Anyone who knows real estate knows that it actually makes 0 sense for Cesar to offer this. If he was as experienced and legitimate as he claims, he could borrow hard money at 10 to 14% a year. Why give the investors 30% every 6 months if you can borrow for half that over the full year? DJ Envy promoted Cesar for multiple years to millions of people on his radio show and Instagram. He shared the stage with him at seminars. He had a team handling attendees' information to upsell them into investment opportunities at the seminars. Cesar was then promoting investment opportunities to these attendees at an office next door to Envy. Envy is trying to convince us that he lent out his credibility and reputation to a criminal and scammer to millions of people and didn't make $1 off of that? Come on, man. Cesar wants his phone number hidden from the feds right now since they're probably starting to call him. If you want your personal data, phone number, and personal address hidden as well, I have the perfect solution for you. Incogni is on your side for helping remove your information from data brokers. Just a couple weeks ago, I received a letter in the mail indicating that my personal information had been leaked. You don't realize how big of a deal this is until it happens to you. The number of victims impacted, $422.1 million, increased by almost 41.5% from 2021. What's frightening is how often often our data is being used against us. This chart highlights just how many large-scale data breaches there were last year alone. The DOJ recently found these 3 data brokers as providing personal data that induce scammers to make millions of dollars targeting vulnerable customers. If you want a service that has a really simple sign-up process, check out Incogni and start protecting your data today. The first 100 people to use code Cornelia at the link in the description down below will get 60% off of Incogni. It's a great service and I'd recommend checking it out. Back to the video. The key element in this case is, when did Envy realize this investment opportunity was a Ponzi scheme?
If DJ Envy had no idea that this was going on, and like I said, he appears to be on its face a victim himself, then everything should be fine. But if he did know, and there came a crossroad where maybe at one point he didn't, and he found out that this was a Ponzi scheme and that he was still perpetuating this narrative that make 25, 30, 35% in 5, 6, 7, 8 months, then there's a problem for him.
During discovery of the civil cases and during the inevitable criminal cases for Cesar, we're going to find out when DJ Envy knew that this investment opportunity was not legitimate and what his behavior was after. So what happens if Envy knew and still promoted the opportunity?
It could very well be the same liability that Cesar has. They can tie them in both together. They can be charged both for the same crime.
For my teachers that said I wouldn't make it here, I scam a day what you make a year. Might get hit with the RICO. Let's do a quick breakdown of what type of crime Cesar committed. Cesar was acquiring commercial loans on properties and raising money from investors for the same property. Not disclosing that fact to investors is fraud, and taking a loan for renovations and never even renovating the property is mortgage fraud. Receiving money via wire from investors is also a crime. Can you guess which one?
If money was wired into an account that was supposed to be used for an investment, but it wasn't, and the person who sent the money relied on that representation, now you have wire fraud. You know, a lot of people don't know, when you have a wire fraud case, every single wire is a charge. Every single exchange of funds is a charge. That's a separate charge. And every charge carries years in prison.
From what I've seen, I'm convinced that Cesar committed over 100 crimes in this scheme. Here's one I didn't even think of before.
It can be as simple as an IRS issue where he took money that was supposed to be invested for a project in Patterson, but then took that money and used it to buy a car or use it to buy a personal item. And he didn't declare that income on his tax return. If he did that one time, okay, you could make the excuse that I didn't know, I wasn't aware that I had to report that. But if the IRS can prove that this was systematic, that he did it over and over again, and he failed to declare income, that's tax evasion. You can go to prison just for that.
The Pinas were still living in their Franklin Lakes mansion this summer despite their first and second mortgages going into default. I would not be surprised if they falsified tax returns to acquire loans for the sole purpose of taking the money. Add another charge to the crime scoreboard. We know that Cesar was signing joint venture agreements with the investors, which left them unprotected.
These situations, these were all, for the most part, unsecured. It was just a joint venture agreement. So it was person investing money with Cesar, okay, his company. That company would use that money to do X, Y, and Z. And in 5 months, 6 months, here's how much you would make back. I think most people just wanted to know, okay, I'm giving you 200 grand. How much are you giving me back? But it's not that simple. Attorneys are trained to think worst case scenario. But I think when people signed these agreements, they thought best case scenario. My best case scenario is I'm going to give this guy 100 grand. He's going to give me back 135. That's 35%. I don't know of anything providing those type of returns right now. I don't know of a single investment. So when he presented these agreements, I think he presented it to them in a way of, look, I have this property. Here's this house. Give me 100 grand. I've done it before. I did it for this person. I did it for DJ Envy. Look how much he made. And they relied on that representation. And that's where you come to the question of fraud. Was this fraud? I'm not saying it was, but that's the question that needs to be answered.
The major mistake that investors made was giving Cesar money without having their money secured by anything. When you flip houses and need money for the purchase and renovation, you acquire a hard money loan. The lenders place a lien on the property, and if you don't pay them back according to the terms of the agreement, they can foreclose on you and recoup their money through the sale of the asset. These investors didn't have a lien on the property, so they didn't actually own anything. It was just a signed piece of paper with Cesar, essentially.
When it's a secured transaction, literally, if you don't get your money back, you can foreclose, you can file an action for specific performance, you can go to the court and say, I lent my money to this investor to rehab this property. He owns the property, but he hasn't rehabbed it. Please force the sale of this property so I can get back my money. Or you can foreclose on the mortgage and have the property go up for a sheriff sale. When it does sell, you'll get back your money then. But that's not what happened here. This was, here's 100 grand. Let me know when my 135 is ready. So obviously there's a lot of people that were damaged by this. So now they have to go run to the courthouse and file a lawsuit in something called the law division.
I don't know what you heard about me, but my investors can't get a dollar out of me. No Cadillacs or investment dollars you won't see. In prison, my ass cheeks are going to CLAP. Cesar is facing numerous civil lawsuits and likely will be facing criminal complaints soon. Now let's discuss how the victims can get paid back.
They could win a couple ways. They could win by technicality if they don't answer discovery or something like that. They could win on summary judgment, basically saying, hey, court, there's no dispute here. If we take everything that we say as fact and you view it in the light most favorable to the defendant, I still win. And the court could issue a summary judgment. Or it can go to trial and you can get a judgment and the judge can rule in your favor. But all that is, like what I was telling you earlier, it's a piece of paper that says Cesar owes me this much. That's it.
An unfortunate reality for victims in Ponzi schemes like this one is that collecting becomes the next problem. You can have a signed contract with Cesar and be able to win a lawsuit, but if he doesn't have any money, you don't have any money to collect.
Now you have to go collect on that piece of paper. And that's what a lot of people, they don't realize. They think that the judge is going to go out there and turn Cesar upside down and shake him from his pants and the money. No, that's not going to happen.
Not all hope is lost. Given that Cesar does own some of these properties without a mortgage, there is a way to force a sale.
If they can prove the money they invested was going to be used specifically for a property and that property isn't liened or encumbered, they can file a specific performance suit and force the sale of that property. But again, who owns the property? Are there liens? Are there tax liens? We don't know.
Many of these investors likely signed up thinking Cesar owned $50 million in real estate. If things go wrong, he could sell a property and pay the victims back, right? Well, maybe not.
He said, I have $50 million in real estate. But what does that mean? Does he have $50 million in real estate and $70 million in mortgages? We don't know. You can have $1 billion in real estate. But if the properties aren't worth more than what you owe on them or more than what the liens are, he could very well be in the negative. So he could have $50 million in real estate, but a $20 million negative net worth.
Since the last video was released, another lawsuit has been filed against Cesar. Ruddy Rodriguez filed a complaint alleging Cesar took $100,000 for the 523 Park Ave property that probably sounds familiar to a lot of you by now. Additionally, 3 new investors reached out to me privately sharing they've lost a combined $700,000 that I haven't reported on. Correction, I just had another 3 reach out to me totaling an additional $2.4 million in losses. It's entirely possible that Cesar's real estate empire was built on investor money in the Ponzi scheme. This is Jenny Tips, Cesar's wife. One of Jenny's close friends is this woman named Teresa Gudice. On March 4th, 2014, Teresa and her husband Joe entered a guilty plea to 41 counts of fraud following a deal struck with federal prosecutors. The couple was accused of engaging in bank, mail, wire, and bankruptcy fraud, which allegedly saw them net over $5 million over a 10-year period. That sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? Their conversations probably go like this. Hey Jenny, has your husband committed more felonies than my husband yet? Haha, girl, my hubby has yours beat by a long shot. Jenny, if you ever need help with navigating prison after committing fraud, I'll be glad to help. Cesar and Jennifer are going to start collecting default judgments with all of the victims lining up. Here's what could happen.
Now, if you do get a judgment, in New Jersey, the process is you could serve something called an information subpoena. And you could say, hey, defendant, I have a judgment against you. You owe me $1 million. I need to know where are your bank accounts, how many cars you have, do you own any jewelry? I need a list of all the real estate that you own, any companies that you have a holding in, all this financial information. Most defendants either ignore it or they don't want to answer it, or they answer it incorrectly, or they answer it incomplete. If that happens, the plaintiffs could actually file a request for the defendant's arrest. If that warrant is signed by a judge in a civil court, they're not going to go and issue an arrest warrant and go to his house and arrest him. But if he's pulled over and he's flagged to have a warrant under failure to respond to an information subpoena, they could arrest him. And again, these aren't criminal charges, but force him to answer that subpoena.
Cesar appears to be avoiding the civil lawsuits. I asked Peter if he could do this.
Civilly, of course. You could let it all go into default, get all these judgments, and then go file bankruptcy.
Cesar spent years claiming to be a real estate mogul, but now that it's time to pay his debts, he went ghost. We know he owns properties, so hopefully these will be forced sales and money goes to the victims.
I'm not a bankruptcy attorney, but I know from experience through real estate litigation, there is a nuance with bankruptcy where if the debt that you owe was a result of a fraud, meaning you took on that debt knowing that you might file bankruptcy or knowing you couldn't pay off that debt, it could become non-dischargeable in bankruptcy.
All of this is the least of Cesar and Jenny's worries. The feds are surely investigating by now, which means it's almost over for them. This is clearly a fraud scheme, and they'll have no problem building a strong case against them. And when Cesar gets out of prison, the only job available to him will be dog walking.
And now Cesar and I own over 2,000 properties worth probably around $100 million.
If they do, time to sell and pay off the victims. If you didn't own that much, then you committed false advertising fraud. If you raised money from investors based on claims that you owned $100 million in real estate, and you didn't, and then Cesar and Envy took the money and ran, you deserve prison time. Shout out to Tony the Closer for leading the charge on this story and holding DJ Envy and Cesar Pina accountable. We have one final character that hasn't been introduced yet.
When am I get my rent? What kind of property manager are you?
It's not my fault, man.
The kind that has a sharp haircut all the time, I'll tell you that much.
Luchi is Caesar's brother, and he is crazy. How many times has your brother fired you? Every day.
Luchi is my favorite character in this story. Luchi is a member of the team and should be included in depositions as well. Considering he's Caesar's brother, I wouldn't be surprised if he knew about the Ponzi scheme. This definitely does not look like someone involved in a criminal operation. He also looks like Hard Rock Nick's cousin. Luchi is the only property manager I know that gives his tenants cash money. At least he always keeps his relationships professional.
Listen, it's going down December 9th. Come check us out with my big bro Flippin' NJ and DJ MB. This is going to be our second seminar.
I've never seen a property manager hold so much cash and focus so much on his jewelry. And if there's anyone I want dealing with my money, it's a guy that definitely looks like this. Given how frequently he and his friends visit cash-heavy businesses, I'm very skeptical of where the rent money is going after being collected. He's also the first contractor in the history of real estate to visit a nail salon. It gets even better. Looking at Cesar, we know this is a family that likes to eat, but sometimes it's not just food being eaten.
You see how sexy I'm getting and slim putos? You don't know the diet. Eat a lot of pussy, a lot of pussy.
This is the guy Cesar hires for construction projects and to manage his alleged real estate empire. Remember, Envy and Cesar own $100 million worth of real estate, yet 30 or more victims haven't been paid $1. Maybe they mean they own their property in the metaverse. Thanks for watching.